Hello once again, and welcome back to the use and abuse of Laura Endicott. This is Scene 3 from Chapter 2, How Useful. It was entirely within the customary that I should not be invited to any formal dinner amongst family and whatever the extent of their visiting relations may be. On the one hand, however, I was abruptly confronted with my isolation, as the small staff of servants Sir Hugh maintained in-house did not themselves sup together. As it turned out, the lady's maid and the lady herself would dine together on private occasion, though not, of course, on such evenings as this would be. The cook ate by herself, as did the manager. The other maid, when meeting me, betrayed a dire sense of inferiority and crept off to whatever corner of the huge house she rusticated within. The cook was amicable enough. Sylvie had trained in France and brightened up when I referred to her as a chef. Martha, the housemaid, helped with meal preparation, and it was to my advantage that, following through upon one of the lesser evils of the blank cheque I had rendered to Sir Hugh regarding my own general capacities, that I also threw myself into cooking in so far as I was competent. Both Sylvie and Martha expressed their undying gratitude for. As governess, I automatically held the second highest status amongst the live-in help, and that far greater than any but Hargreaves himself. And speaking of the gent, he, as said, also preferred to dine alone, though he did extend a weekly invitation to me, as he put it, to take stock of current conditions and plan ahead. He offered this with a kind of fatalism which bespoke of past iniquities, or at least it did to my own only half-rational countenance. None of this did he place upon my shoulders, but his attitude was nevertheless enveloped with a sense of determinism, which I found to be out of character for someone my age. Just so, Hargreaves must be approaching 70 at the least, and so his sensibility was not at all inexplicable along those lines. It might well be that he saw me as his ultimate successor, for, after those 4 years of tutoring and mentoring the two young persons had passed, my current role would have been fulfilled. It was not an unpleasant idea of a future had I been planning such on my own. No doubt Philip would think that it was solely up to him to provide for us, and perhaps children, though I maintained my skepticism to that specific outcome. But I had given him enough caution that he had parted from me with a temperate set of expectations regarding his own vocational aspirations. In a word, I was not one to clamber on to a man and goad him into becoming the sole source of income, or even status. My face became grim as I recalled to myself my own hard path. I had lost my parents at perhaps the worst age one could lose them. I had steeled myself against all comers and conflicts. I had convocated with the highest academic honors at both Hilliard's and Cambridge. But then the reality of my womanhood came home to me. If there had been further funds, graduate study was not impossible. But to what end? As there were no positions within the academy for women, or so I had been informed upon more than one occasion. Teaching was, of course, an option. Even now, I had simply to apply for a license and take an exam, which would be child's play. But then I had seen what the teacher's life was like, in the very sort of school I had been sent to as a youth. As pleasant as becoming an estate manageress might appear, becoming a schoolmarm was as unpleasant. I had forbade myself that possibility as soon as I had left Hilliard's, indeed, even before. But the fact that I now had two options before me, whereas just 2 weeks prior I had none, was heartening. I held that reality to myself as I dined alone in a sitting room adjacent to the library, both of which were on the far side of the great house to where the dinner party and its social spillage were taking place. It was the easiest thing in the world to procure a book and finish the evening reading it, but as I was doing so, a cautious patter of footfalls made me glance up. "Please forgive me, Miss Endicott." It was Sarah standing there in the middle distance, halfway between the arched portal entrance and where I sat. She appeared to be shaking, though not obtrusively. I made to get up, but she gestured to me to remain seated. She used both hands and pressed them out in front of her in a most genuflective manner. The encounter had thus begun quite oddly, and my look must have communicated that fact to her, for she immediately continued. I just wanted to apologize for the presentation of myself and my sister earlier today. It was, unladylike." Clearly this was not the word she was framing in her mind, but as her mentor, now officially so some hours before, it was my duty not to correct her, but rather to guide her. "Miss Sarah, I am not in the least concerned about your personality. You are, shall we say, your own person and no other. Exploring who that person may be and may become is something I can help you with, but neither myself nor any other person has either the right or the duty to place any claim upon its nature." Her eyes widened, and then I was up and over to her. She had begun to weep more copiously than I had imagined possible, given our first encounter, and yet it was she who had embraced me, initiated that common intimacy, though one would think uncommon enough, the very first evening of being introduced to a new governess, no less. "What on earth—" I began, but then recalled I had no right to ask after such things, and of anyone in this household. And yet Sarah now rallied gamely enough, gently pushed out of our shared embrace, and took a deep breath, sticking her chin out and blinking back the tears, just as I would imagine she might well have done on numerous other occasions when enduring some kind of punishment or other. This context differed from anything so simple and direct, and I was made aware of that in as simple and direct a way. In no manner did the girl betray any kind of physical hurt. She had clearly not been subject to chastisement, and to that I inwardly breathed a sigh of relief. I had not gone so far to ponder the implications of my authority to that regard, but something I needed to ask Sir Hugh about was if anyone else held a similar authority over his daughters, and I needed to ask tonight. "Forgive me, miss, I took a liberty." "Nonsense, Sarah. I am here for both you and your sister. Yes, there may be times when the three of us are at odds about this or that, but I need tell you here and now, and you may relay this to your sister post-haste if you would, that my whole purpose is to support your futures. I am not here to judge either of you, and the only evaluation to which you shall be subject will be academic. Anything else will be but a suggestion, as gently rendered as possible." It was transparent by now that I was presenting myself as the polar opposite of that of my predecessor. The girl's commentary about discipline earlier today was not just a steam-letting, so it had proved. However much more to it than that there indeed may be, I did not consider to be all that important. For my part, the role to be played was not so much a balancing the ledgers of child-raising, but rather a vindication of the rights of personhood, rights which I took to be inalienable. I was an inveterate follower of John Stuart Mill and Harriet Martineau, Mary Wollstonecraft, as well as Mary Shelley, and kindred spirits to these regards, and to my delight I had found that all of my female peers at the college had been as well. "I beg of you, miss, my sister and I are not bad girls, ill-behaved sometimes." "Sarah, from the moment you both opened your mouths, I knew neither of you were impossible. I told your father how amused I was at your banter, though I also took it most seriously. Should I reassure you, you poor thing, that I shall not beat you day and night? No, I think what you need is some sense that you are safe in reality as well as in principle. Is that not it?" Now she nodded vociferously. Good Lord! Oh, good heavens! This was much more serious than I would have imagined. "I do not know how to speak of this. It is shameful. All the more so as I derive a great pleasure therefrom, a pleasure that is as much a Janus as I myself have become." To this I could only stare in disbelief. On the creditable side, there had been clearly no absence of cultural literacy and general education in the household. Sarah was not only well-spoken, she was proving fully capable of executing reference sources, as well as placing them in an analytic capacity, either by analogy or, worse in this case, surely, by homology. I tested this. "A startling image, my dear thing." "Not an image, miss." "What, then? A performance, surely." "At the very least, yes, a mask, but one that has me in its thrall." "Well, then, sweet Sarah, I bid you discard it. If you cannot with others, you can do so with me, right here and right now. Need I fetch the cane to compel your obedience?" I added this with a smile placed as far away from a smirk as possible, and she responded by displaying a misshapen grin on her now drying lips and cheeks. "You shall now see why I was so keen on you remaining seated then," was how she began. I sat up on the edge of the divan now, my hands clasped before me and staring straight into her eyes. This was something I had learned to do at Hilliard's, though in no formal manner. It had been the only thing that had calmed my dorm mate down after she had been flogged, or the like. She had told me often and again, when sauntering hand in hand in the flowered fields which lay adjacent to the campus, or when the both of us were entwined naked in one of our tiny beds, that I had made her feel like she was the only person in the world, and that this had overtaken her miseries. Yes, and in a world where we are nothing and no one, this is sometimes all we have to give. And so I gave it now. "You shall think me a betrayer, a denizen of Babylon, a study in scared scarlet." I nodded my head and then gasped at my faux pas. "Oh, my good Lord, no, Sarah, forgive me now. I was encouraging her poiesis." Now she laughed aloud, thank goodness. "I have passed my first test in rhetoric, then." "Good heavens, I dare say that rhetoric is not going to be an issue for you. But, Sarah, please, I have no right to ask you of such things. I manifest only the privilege of listening to you tell them, speaking of rhetoric." That truly is good. I admire you, miss. You are beautiful, composed, confident. My goodness, to come into a place like this, and at your age. Father said you are but 20. In 5 years I shall be 20, and I feel constellations away from being able to be that, if you follow. Sarah, as did I at your age, as did I. Yes, and the more so given my situation. But perhaps no parents were yet better than certain kinds of parents. Indeed, Hilliard's headmistress had told me quite directly early on that this was the case. At the time it had made little enough impression upon me, knowing just how good and how noble were my own. But of course I acknowledged it, as even a 13-year-old would understand such a sentiment. That is a kindness, surely. No, Sarah, it is a truth, and one I believe to be quite generally applicable. These next 5 years shall be the making of you, as is said, especially for a young woman. If I told you of my tribulations, you would be unable to take me seriously as your mentor, your teacher. Miss, may I gently disagree? I nodded, and of course to her. It is your humanity that is attractive, and that is what Father finds desirable about you. Please remember that when he... Aha! It was as I had imagined, then. At least what I felt could only be the worst case. I had already resolved to bear it up, and nothing thus far had changed that resolve. It would be unfair to let a mere youth speak of such things without aid. Sarah, is your mother infirm? Is she sane? Now the girl's face clouded over. She is sane, if you consider sanity expressed in all that is tradition. This is what Livy meant when she said our mother inhabited habit, as it were. I understand. Very good there, by the way. Sarah noted this with a sheepish grin, but it served to break her focus on the untoward. May I ask you to prevail upon Father to become our sole disciplinarian? It is of the utmost, and not because either of us seek to avoid being punished. Speaking for myself, at least, I shall submit to you. Sarah, good Lord, I am not a tyrant, not by any means, and I already had it in my head when you began to sob earlier that I must sequester, shall we say, all critical authority to myself. That is one way I could best serve you and your sister. You may submit to my authority, but at the end of the day I remain your servant. I would not necessarily say that to a younger child, but you and Olivia are far too mature not to grasp this dynamic. I appreciate this, I really do, miss. Livy would as well. My sister is, well, quite a bit more clever than I. I cannot match wits with her, as you most likely have already ascertained. If there is action to be had, it is her plan of action that is enacted. If there is a puzzle to be solved, it is her lead that resolves it. I cannot tell you the countless times I wished I had had a sister. I pity you, miss. At the same time, you would not choose Livy. Perhaps not. But, Sarah, you have told me of a great sorrow, and yet a nameless one. And, not to be in the least diffident, I would hope that your self-characterization was as rhetorical as were your illustrations thereto. I cannot disavow what I have been, and what I am. This very night, last night, the night before. I know in my heart that you respect honesty above all. You are a student of the truth of things. This is another reason why Father has brought you on here so rapidly and with no demur. He knows now that you have the integrity to rise to the occasion, if you will. Actually, Sarah, this time I will not. But as this is your secret to tell, I would never attempt to force it from you. But on my side, I implore you not to give in to your self-reckoning. Whatever it is you have been compelled to do, you are a child yet. Not childish by any means. But the fullest age of citizenry for women in our empire is not even 18, but rather 21. Why, I myself am not yet completely and officially able to execute my legal will, for instance. A scandal. More than that, an insult. But it is one which you and I can share, and I shall be here to see you through the worst of it. The worst of it began 2 years ago, but this is no stain upon your soul. My soul was by now in Normandy, surely. On the road to Paris, yes. Sarah was far too observant not to note my sudden droop. Now she was beside me, reaching out a hand. I took it once again into my own and gave it as warm and as reassuring a squeeze as I was able. Fortified, she adumbrated. My father feels as guilt-ridden as do I. Your predecessor was a beast. He understood his error. I have forgiven him, but my sister has not. That distinction was beginning to dawn on me, but of course I could only guess at its source. That is not a source, but rather a symptom. The source is unspeakable. Livy knows of it. Of course she does. I have told her. Her response was not at all that I had betrayed our mother, but rather that I had betrayed she herself. I had broken our bond of sibling trust. It is that, and only that, mind you, which I regret. I have a dim sense of morbidity in my mind's eye. Sarah, you call me beautiful, but at 15 I was no prettier than you are now. I was no wiser. I was no more a saint nor a sinner. No! Oh, miss, I apologize. Damn it and damn me. I am forsaken, miss. Utter nonsense. What God can exist who judges in such a manner? The one God who knew what it was like to live as one of us certainly would never do so. That is wise, and I have but 5 years to gain such a wisdom. Well, your sister might have it that this is the reason you have me. Ha! I truly wish it were so. But you are not here for either myself or my sister, not in the way you imagine, and your vocation demands of you. Then pray tell, my dear girl, why am I here? You are to replace me in my father's bed. Now my eyes were tightly closed. All was silence and darkness. If Sarah was still present, I had no inkling. My dinner was a mystery. The book I had been reading, a corpus of blank pages. I found my body shaken, as if a novel electric current, nay, rather a bolt of primordial lightning, had struck straight through it. But it was that very stunning shock that raised me once again to consciousness. The girl had seated herself, her formal dress askew and hiked way up, and her legs flung over, crossed upon one of the settee's curves, their calves slender and even elegant, and her whole being no longer girlish but rather a youthful womanhood, knowing and desiring and experienced and cursed. But this was surely my projection, or at least its evaluation was. I blinked, and the image gained a certain clarity. No, Sarah was simply a very pretty young lady who had no illusions about her sexuality. How could I speak of such things when by the same age I had been loved by more than one schoolmate? Then the scree of lightning sought approach once again. This was different. It was horrifyingly different, and the terror in my breast it provoked was a different order than that invoked by an impending punishment, for the girls at Hilliard's would be at worst shaking and contrite, but never petrified out of their wits. Its head mistress was stern, but not sadistic. Her school would have had to fold if the latter had been true, even now, even then. Sarah, from now on address me as Laura, when we are not in the schoolroom together, was how I opened. I am grateful, Miss Laura. Yes, Laura. And I regret to be the vehicle for such a message as has befallen you. I am truly sorry for all of this. As if all of this were in one iota your doing, let alone your faults. Sarah, my gods, you are a victim here. A victim, yes. Should I now be chastising you verbally, as in, don't you dare shake your head at me, young lady? However reckless it may be, I must, dearest new friend Laura, I must, for not only did I offer father myself when he was in the deepest pit of despair, I have taken, almost from the beginning, an ongoing and often intense pleasure from our forbidden coupling. It is one thing to offer. I might have done the same if it had been just my mother who was killed in the wreck. Oh, you are not aware of this. Oh, good Lord, no. Sarah, do not weep for me. No, this is supposed to be about you. Nothing and no one else. Oh, for heaven's sakes, my word. Both of your parents, then? How long ago? I then narrated a précis of the events of Round Oak and what came of it all. It was to me a distraction, but for Sarah it had clearly strengthened our bond. Something dreadful must have occurred, and her mother must have been the victim therefrom. But no, not so, given her sister's comments regarding their mother. Now I feel I must not presume upon you. And father knows of this? No, I shall tell him he cannot substitute you for me. I am used to his ways. I desire them. But it is not right, Sarah. Is it right that you find yourself his mistress? Sarah, I am a grown woman. It is my decision if I should make it. Not yet being 21 is a judicial item only, having to do with estate law and whether or not one's parents could legally act against a marriage, that sort of thing. I understand. Even so, this is not your family, not your responsibility. Are you trying to tell me that you would harbor a jealousy against me? No! I am doing my duty as the elder daughter. I told father I would expose him if he ever sought out Livy in such a manner. He never has and never would. But there is irony in that. In that your sister is jealous. Yes. Oh, yes, it is true, Miss Laura. She has been betrayed and shown up, and in a manner that I would never have associated with her. She, too, is a young woman, after all. Not like that. Livy is, well, more like a machine than a human being. A very realistic machine, to be sure. One capable of desire and jealousy and loyalty and even trust. but not one capable of love, you are implying. She was, but before I began to love my father in that way. Good God. Say something, anything. What could be said, though? And at this point, my first evening in my new employ, a young woman whose greatest fear should have been a caning, and ever and only that, but no, not this one. She was so far beyond anything juvenile, punishment included, that I had no words for a moment. Then you must resurrect that bond. There is nothing more sacred than that of siblings. I hold it in the highest regard, and yes, perhaps I idealize it, given its absence in my life. Here is a piquant thought for you tonight. When my fiancée and I make love, I sometimes imagine that he is my long-lost brother. Ha! Yet surely that is not a sin, and common enough. Oh, I am sure that it is. Sarah, do you actually believe in sin? No, I do not. And yet I have sinned even so, sinned against my sister. Oh, yes, my mother can go to hell, speaking of sin. Your loyalties are with your father, then, solely. Yes, they are. He was mortified when he discovered the character of our old governess. Indeed, he did not accept me into his bedchamber for some weeks before he vanquished her from the house. That was an odd way of putting it, but there had been far too much revealed in far too short a space of time to pursue such a turn of phrase. He was in penance. Precisely. Well, I never. That I cut the figure of not merely a saint, but some kind of otherworldly heroine, neither is befitting to my character, in all honesty. You have descended, Laura. You now live in the pit along with us. Your features shall not be blemished, but your conscience will be. Sarah, you are a past master. I applaud you. But it is your courage and stoicism that I truly applaud. What is lacking is your objectivity, I fear. May I place that mirror for you? If I did so, would you gaze into it? Yes, but not for the time being. Yes, I shall. I shall gaze into it and behold a courageous girl who betrayed her sister in order to save her father's life. And her image will teach me that courage is a naked sword, which cares not which way it cuts, and I am thence cut to ribbons by its blade. Sarah spoke this as if in eulogy. Her face had resumed its mask. I held my breath for a moment. Then, if you do this thing for my father and I shall do anything for you. Anything at all. I blinked, and she was gone. Up off the settee, her dress and skirts falling into place as she cantered out the door like any young girl, swaying her hips and flexing her calves and sashaying her arms and arching her neck, and all of it terribly, but completely desirable. How useful, Sir Hugh had asked. I now knew the answer to that question. It was as I had imagined, but to the nth degree. Thus its quality was dimensions deeper than its quantity. Becoming the knight's mistress was something I not only could do, but had imagined myself doing, in spite of my nascent love for Philip. I might even have told myself that it was part of the job at hand, and I was supremely equipped to play that role, given my youth and my figure, my features and my charms. But now everything about it had been altered. It was no longer a whim or a lark, no longer an effort at conferring favor and status upon myself. No, it had become a mission, and one as unholy and shrouded by shadows as anything I could presently conjure to mind. As much as his elder daughter had desired him, as much as he had suffered from whatever his wife and perhaps others had heaped upon him, Sir Hugh was a villain. Not a simple villain, to be sure, but a villain none the less. And I, then, a villain's mistress? No, more a daughter's savior. That was how I must look at it. It was something I imagined, in my distant ardor and romance, that I could even tell of to Philip, and he would forgive me. Yes, he would, and I knew it then and there. The more pressing question was whether or not I could forgive myself. But in the absence of my soul, that other question could not now even be asked, let alone answered. Thank you for listening.